Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry. Today's video is going to be my review of the new summon showcase, Thunder and Splendor. This time featuring Albert from some of Cygame's other properties. So if you're brand new to Dragalia Lost, you should know that this showcase lasts until March 12th, and this is a normal summon showcase, by which I mean everything featured here will appear in the normal summoning pool in the future. The advantage to these summon showcases, of course, is that certain Wyrmprints, dragons, and adventurers have an appearance rate up, and generally speaking, your best chances of targeting someone specific are when they are on focus like that. So we're going to go through all of the Wyrmprints, dragons, and adventurers today with the timestamps on screen now. I do like to start with the Wyrmprints and dragons, since I like to incorporate those into some of the builds we'll look at for the adventurers toward the end of the video. But as always, with the new summon showcase comes a new giveaway, and the Gleam link is in the description below, so if you wish to take part, head on over to Gleam, and it's pretty easy to do so. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into our review, this time starting with our first 3-star Wyrmprint, the Davian Wetlands. So this Wyrmprint has the standard stats of any 3-star Wyrmprint, 76 max HP and 20 max strength. It has some really pretty artwork, I have to commend it. I'm not always a fan of landscapes, but we're here for the analysis, and of course, this Wyrmprint only provides bog res, it's the only ability, and that means it is going to be outclassed by existing Wyrmprints. So at 4-star from the gacha pool, the Wyrmprint Promises the Rain provides a higher amount of bog res, more stats, and also provides some water res to lower the damage you take from water foes. Besides that, there's also the Dragon Dance Wyrmprint. If you were playing earlier this year, we got that for free during the Skyborn Spectacle raid. That just straight up provides 50% bog res once it's max unbound, and even though its stats are lower than those of Promises in the Rain, that's a large amount of affliction resistance. It can patch up some characters who don't have 100% bog res, so both of those are better options than this 3-star, and for now, the best use of it is just to sell it for Eltwater. Moving on from there, we come to the first of our featured 4-star Wyrmprints, this time New World Escort, which is brand new to the game. The first ability on this Wyrmprint is Skill Prep, and it goes up to 20% once you max unbind it. The second ability is Recovery Potency, which goes up to 5%. So you might think this is similar to an existing Wyrmprint called Destiny's Hand, and you'd be right, that also has Skill Prep and Recovery Potency, but the percentages are different. So Destiny's Hand only gets up to 15% skill prep, but it gets more recovery potency, it gets up to 8% recovery potency. So there is a slight variation as well as some variation in the stats. But at the end of the day, the limitation both of these Wyrmprints face is neither 15% nor 20% are really sweet spots for skill prep. Some characters have skill prep built in as one of their abilities, but typically in multiples of 25%. So they might have 50% skill prep, 75% skill prep, and only getting 15 or 20% extra isn't going to be enough to allow those characters to start off with a skill right at the beginning of a match, which is when using skills can be very relevant for things like High Dragon Trials or even some of the new Void Battles. So for all of those reasons, I do think New World Escort is a weaker Wyrmprint. It's probably worth hanging on to if you like the artwork and just want to collect it. If you're a newer player, it will probably be one of your better recovery potency Wyrmprints for a while, but there is a free Wyrmprint from this event as well, so if you've already picked up that Wyrmprint for free, then you may not want to use this. If you've been playing before and say you were around during Christmas, there was a free Wyrmprint during Dragon Yule, a slice of Dragon Yule, which provided 25% skill prep, so if the skill prep is what you want, that is probably what you want to be looking at instead. Otherwise, I think New World Escort is just fine. I'm glad there's at least a little bit of variation compared to Destiny's Hand, but this is not one to really summon for. Moving on, we come to our second Wyrmprint that's featured at 4-star. This time around, What a Handful! And it also has recovery potency. Its recovery potency goes up to 8%, once it's max unbound, and it has poison res, which goes up to 20%. And just like with New World Escort, this Wyrmprint suffers from the problem that 20% on poison res isn't really a sweet spot. Characters sometimes have up to 75% poison res if they are a natural 3-star, and they are looking for 25% to get up to 100% total. So just throwing on 20% isn't going to do a whole lot for characters like that. And there's also that free Wyrmprint I mentioned earlier, which I'll show on screen now from the new event. That is also going to provide recovery potency and poison res, and even though the stats are worse, you get that for free, so I don't think this is really a reason to summon. As an aside, I've also gotten plenty of this Wyrmprint during previous summoning showcases, so it's also a skip for me. Now we come to the 5-star Wyrmprints, and this is where things get a little more interesting, but do keep in mind that 5 stars are pretty hard to target. So the first 5-star Wyrmprint we have is the Shining Overlord. This one is an offensively oriented Wyrmprint. It has one of the highest attack stats in the game for a Wyrmprint, highest strength stats at 65. It also has 176 HP once it's max unbound. And as far as abilities, the first one is very powerful, providing up to 35% skill damage to sword units. So the disadvantage to Wyrmprints like this is they're narrow in use, but with that narrowness comes some raw power. For the most part, for a general skill damage Wyrmprint, the most you can get is 25%. That's what you see on Wyrmprints like Valiant Crown, Resounding Rendition, Plunder Pals, as well as Heralds of Hinamoto, some of the strongest attacking Wyrmprints in the game. So having 35% is really good, but you have to have a sword adventure in mind to be able to use this fully, and if you're a low spending player, it's hard to justify spending on this and investing into this versus those more general use Wyrmprints that could work with a variety of adventurers. The second ability of Shining Overlord is actually pretty interesting though, Dragon's Claws 2. It means that every time you shapeshift, your character will get powered up with a strength buff. So this is already seen on characters like Yuden and Xainfried, but we've never gotten it on a Wyrmprint before. The nice thing about a static strength buff that sticks with you for the rest of the match is if your character cares about how many buffs they have. For instance, Xander's first skill deals more damage for every buff he has, then this is going to be really relevant to them. So I think this Wyrmprint is great on Xander, and also great on Yuden because Yuden has Dragon's Claws built in, like I said, so that means every time you transform, you're not just getting one, but you're actually getting 2 strength boosts. Both Xander and Yuden also have 2 attacking skills in their kits, and they can equip 5-star elemental weapons that add yet another attacking skill. So this is actually a perfect Wyrmprint if either of those are your favorite characters or you just really want to push them to their limits. This will be an amazing choice. It's also going to be good on some of the new adventures we look at, since their primary skills are attacking skills as well. Gilgamesh also looks really sweet on the artwork and the refined artwork, but as I said before, I think this is one you have to cautiously invest in if you're a low spending or free to play player. If you have the money and you buy golds and keys every month, you can easily unbind this as a spending player, and then it starts to look really good. Now the final new Wyrmprint we have is a Solitary Light, and this one has some more beautiful artwork of Felicia and Phantom, the new free unit and dragon respectively, from the current event. So this Wyrmprint skews a lot more toward HP. It has one of the highest stats, if not the highest stat, for HP of all Wyrmprints in the game, and it is pretty new in terms of its abilities. So the first ability is Light Affliction Guard 2. That means that for the first 3 times your adventurer is hit with a status condition inducing move or affliction inducing move, it will be negated if they are of the light element. Now the second ability is more straightforward and it applies to adventurers of any element. It's going to be Shadow Res of up to 8%. That is also pretty nice because this Wyrmprint wants to be attached to a light adventurer, with that first ability being exclusive to them. So you'd likely bring them to shadow focused content, and having that extra resistance is kind of nice in the second ability. Now the only real comparisons we have for this right now are one off-element sort of print, which we got last time, the Rose print. That one had Flame Affliction Guard and it had Shield Prep. That Flame Affliction Guard could be nice for Void Zephyr, and in the same way I would say that this Light Affliction Guard can be nice for Void Manticore. Because Raging Manticore can inflict both poison and curse, and no light adventurers have 100% resistance to them both, this is actually a pretty nice, safe equipment to have when you're grinding out that fight. Now besides that, I will say the other comparison that exists is Heavenly Holiday. Heavenly Holiday can provide up to 100% curse res or more for light adventurers, meaning that if you have somebody with poison res and the affliction you're worried about is curse, that is going to do just as well for you as this Wyrmprint. Maybe a little bit weaker in the sense you don't get that extra shadow res, but on the other hand, if you were to get hit more than 3 times with affliction inducing moves, that one would guarantee your safety, whereas this one does wear out over time. Overall, this is one of the hardest Wyrmprints for me to evaluate. I think this Wyrmprint starts to look a lot better, just like the Rose Prints, once we get a dual Wyrmprint system. If we are able to equip 2 Wyrmprints, then you can equip a High Dragon Wyrmprint or a damage dealing Wyrmprint, and have this be your secondary option, at which point this definitely starts to look pretty attractive. So as of now, I don't think any of these Wyrmprints are slam dunks that are worth pulling for. I do think that both the Shining Overlord and a Solitary Light could have some useful future applications, and if you love the sword weapon type or have a sword character you want to invest everything into, then the Shining Overlord is probably going to be one of the strongest Wyrmprints you can pick for them. But let's go ahead and move on to the featured dragons on this showcase, starting with the Focus 4-star Lindworm. So Lindworm is a light dragon, and he focuses on boosting the equipped adventurer's strength by 30% at base or 45% once max unbound. Now that Void Battles are out and we're able to get 2 Moonlight Stones from the treasure trade every month, max unbinding these 4-star dragons is starting to look more possible than ever. So at 45%, it's a pretty sizable strength buff, better than everyone except for the next dragon we'll look at, as well as Cupid, who can provide up to 60% once he's max unbound. As a 4-star dragon, Lindworm is pretty solid. I do find that his skill is very slow to use, but for maps like Shadow Imperial Onslaught, that's not necessarily a bad thing because there's often many enemies in the way that will get hit with this beam wave attack that Lindworm performs. Besides that, for other types of hard content, like the Manticore from Void Battles, Raging Manticore, I do think that Lindworm's attack is a little bit slow, but that strength boost, if you don't have Cupid, is going to be really solid. For the current raid as well, because the raid boss doesn't move around too much, and kind of has a wide body with wings and hands to hit, and the body itself, Lindworm's attack, as slow as it is to charge, starts to look pretty good there too. So I do think if you don't have a copy already, Lindworm is a good pickup. As a new player, if you want to get your first light strength dragon, get someone a little bit better than Jupiter, Lindworm will do the trick just fine. Moving on from there, we come to Gilgamesh, who is the new dragon on this showcase, the featured 5-star, and he takes a lot of cues from the existing dragon Prometheus. So Prometheus just came out during the Valentine's Confections event, and Prometheus is part of the normal summoning pool now. What was so unique about him at the time was, instead of providing 60% strength once max unbound, he only provided 50%, but he came with 15% resistance to wind. And Gilgamesh is exactly the same, except he provides 15% resistance to shadow, and he focuses on boosting up the strength of light adventurers. So having played with Prometheus for a while now, I will say that 15% cushion is very comfortable. It feels really good to be able to take less damage in the hardest content of the game. That Prometheus has gotten me through Void Zephyr, High Midgard Stormer, and it's done so pretty effectively. So similarly, I think Gilgamesh will be good for Void Manticore, Raging Manticore, and possibly in the future for High Zodiarch, but that's a challenge that's not out yet, and by the time that comes out, the game could look very different. So while it's hard to speculate, for ranged characters in particular, Gilgamesh will likely be a very desirable option because those characters have inherently lower defense and they want some of that elemental resistance to shore them up. If you're going with a melee character, then Cupid is definitely going to be fine for you if you already have Cupid. You could also use Gilgamesh's resistance to run some other types of Wyrmprints perhaps. That is something that people have been able to do with Prometheus and High Midgard Stormer, but that is still a bit speculative for now. Besides that, I'll just say that Gilgamesh looks like one of the sweetest dragons we've ever had. So if you like the look of this guy, this is going to be his highest appearance rate for the foreseeable future. If that is something that appeals to you, then this will be your best chance to pick him up. Alright, and now we come to the adventurers on this showcase. So the dragons both look fairly good, the Wyrmprints are a little bit worse I would say, but the adventurers all look pretty great, so I'm excited to get into them, starting with the featured 3-star Jakob. So Jakob is a water lancer. He's a defense type, which really just means his stats skew more toward HP and away from strength. His strength stat is pretty low, but that is compensated for somewhat by his first skill, Chain Sting, which can inflict Bog upon enemies. So if you're unfamiliar with this, not only does Bog slow enemy movement down, but it also increases the damage that you actually deal to those enemies. The challenge comes in that not all enemies can actually be inflicted by Bog. It is effective on some of the new bosses. Void Manticore can get hit with Bog, Steel Golem from the Void battles can get hit with Bog, and so can the bosses of Imperial Onslaught for the most part, so that is pretty effective. The second skill that Jakob has is Mercenary Guard, which is somewhat slow to charge, but increases the entire team's defense by up to 15% for 15 seconds. These defensive buffs can be good to combo with double buff abilities on your other adventurers. Those are basically abilities that trigger whenever you get a defensive buff cast. The other use of skills like this is, in the end game, there are certain attacks that are unavoidable, and it can be helpful to have a defense buff at just the right moment to help your team survive. Besides that, as a 3-star, Jakob really only has one unique ability, in his case Skill Prep, which goes up to 50%, and his second and third ability slots are dedicated to Burn Res, where basically he will have 25% Burn Res as a 3-star, 50% as a 4-star, and if you promote him to a 5-star, he can get up to 75% Burn Res. So the challenge Jakob faces is that Water Lances are a pretty saturated pool. We already have Sabella at 3-star, at 4-star we have Elisanne, and at 5-star we have Xainfried. So Jakob does have his work cut out for him somewhat. Now, Jakob's stats are identical to those of Sabella, but they are worse than those of Elisanne and Xainfried, and Elisanne and Xainfried focus more on supporting the team's strength through their strength buffs, whereas Sabella is a similar defender role, but she provides a shield in her first skill instead of what Jakob does with his second skill providing a defensive buff. So I think that Jakob has some tough competition, unfortunately. He is a really sick looking unit design-wise, but I think he's one of those 3-stars that just suffers from the limitations of how 3-stars are built in this game. They only have that one really unique ability, they don't get up to 100% affliction res naturally, and I think that 50% skill prep doesn't really scream to be exploited either. There is a Wyrmprint, the Chocolatiers, which can provide 50% skill prep at base, but if it's promoted to its max unbound form, it can provide 100% skill prep. So that could have been good on anyone, and not just on Jakob because of those 50% prep. So ultimately, I think that Jakob is a fairly weak character. I do think that being able to Bog is not to be underestimated. That's a powerful effect. It can increase the damage of your entire team. The challenge, unfortunately, is that for some of the harder endgame fights, like Hilda in particular, she does not get affected by Bog at all. So for that fight, Xainfried and then Elisanne are your better options. Now, as far as building Jakob goes, I think that his defensive buff is probably the most unique aspect of his kit. So for Wyrmprints, you could give him a Wish Upon the Yule Tree. That was a limited time Wyrmprint that granted its user healing double buff, as well as HP 70% equals defense. That would make him more tanky and allow him to heal himself. A secondary choice could be Valiant Crown. That would provide some extra skill damage for Jakob's first skill, and then every time he used his second skill, he would get a strength double buff, increasing his attack power a little bit. For dragons, I definitely think you want to bolster Jakob's lower strength. So as a 4-star option, using your Moonlight Stones, I definitely think Vojanoi is your best pick. If you have access to a 5-star, I think that Leviathan is probably the strongest choice for Jakob, just because Leviathan can also inflict Bog, and it is a powerhouse, adding an extra 60% to Jakob's strength. As far as teammates go, there are some good options in the water pool who appreciate getting access to Jakob's defense buff. So one that comes to mind immediately is Karina. Because Karina has healing double buff, every time that Jakob casts his Mercenary Guard, she will start to heal herself, and her first skill also deals more damage for every buff she has. The same is true of Xander. He also deals more damage for every buff he has, so he is another good teammate. Both of these characters have stun res though, and Jakob having burn res could be a slight liability, but if you're controlling him and you're in, say, Flame Imperial Onslaught, it probably won't be an issue for you. As far as weapons go for Jakob, The options I would consider are the new lance Vortex Beast, which comes from Void Battles. This is a 5-star lance which would give Jakob an extra 5% strength whenever his HP was above 70%. It'd also give him Slayer Strength, which is nice for something like Imperial Onslaught. Slayer Strength of 4%, so every time he defeated 5 foes, he would get a 4% strength boost. Besides that, if you really want to go all the way with Jakob, I don't think that Ocean Lord is a bad option. That provides a small AoE healing effect, and as a lance unit, that is kind of nice because your HP co-ability does contribute somewhat to the amount that's healed. In the end though, I think despite him looking like a very cool character, Jakob just faces some tough competition. It is nice that he can charge up the skill on Ocean Lord pretty quickly with his skill prep. He can also charge up his defense boost pretty quickly. So ultimately, compared to some of the recent 3-star characters we've gotten, like Marty and even Zhao Lei, I do think that Jakob is a little bit on the weaker side. That does bring us to the next adventure we're looking at today though, and this one is much stronger, Odetta. Pretty solid strength and HP stats, and as a 4-star she has a full kit, unlike Jakob. So Odetta's first skill, Liberty Slash, deals damage in a line ahead. It is a ranged slash similar to what you see on Musashi, or if you've built out an Elemental Flame Blade for someone like Mikoto, it's similar to that, it shoots out waves. Liberty Slash can also debuff enemy defense, which is really powerful, especially if you can align it when you break an enemy boss. For her second skill, Odetta has Freedom Ring, which heals nearby allies and the user, and increases their strength by up to 15% for 15 seconds. That is a pretty sizable buff, especially when you consider that as her third ability, Odetta has an extra buff time bonus. So if you promote her, you'll get that ability, and it means that instead of 15 seconds, you're actually looking at a slightly longer buff, in addition to that heal. To top things off, Freedom Ring has some really nice synergy with Odette's first ability. HP of 70% equals strength. So as long as Odette's HP is above 70%, she is going to gain 10% extra strength. That is a sizable chunk of strength, and the fact that she can heal herself using Freedom Ring means that it's pretty easy to maintain above that threshold. Odetta's final ability is Poison Res, which goes up to 100%. It's perhaps not as desirable as Curse Res because we speculate that Curse will be what High Zodiarch inflicts, since normal Zodiarch also inflicts Curse, but we really don't know that yet, and Poison Res is rare enough. It's only been recently added through characters like Annalie and Fritz, and it was initially available through characters like Julieta and Ron. It's rare enough that it is pretty helpful to have. It's pretty good for someone like Void Manticore, that Raging Manticore strike, so I do think that that's actually not bad on her at all. And then of course, as a sword unit, she has her Dragon Haste co-ability, and she is pretty adept at dealing damage through Force Strikes to the Overdrive gauge, and just doing powerful damage per second with her normal sword combo. So Odetta is a really appealing 4-star to me. I think she continues a trend of very complete 4-stars that we've seen for a while now. We had Fritz a while back, then we had Valentine's Ezzelith, who was also very solid. Now we have Odetta. We've had characters this year like Sazanka and Adis, who also fit into this mold. So I think Odetta is an excellent adventurer, and if you're not able to get Albert on this banner, I think that she is a really good pickup, with the only other light sword besides Albert and her being Raymond, who is a natural 3-star. Raymond does have some nice properties. He has 2 attacking skills, he can cause stun, which is pretty solid, and he has Poison Res, but not as much as Odetta or Albert. But I think that in terms of stats and the completeness of her kit, her defense debuff, her healing, her strength above 70% HP, the fact that she can boost the strength of her teammates, which could lead to much higher team DPS, I think that Odetta is really solid. So as far as building her goes, I would recommend playing up her first skill with something like the new Wyrmprint, the Shining Overlord. I think that is a really solid Wyrmprint on her. It's going to give her some extra skill damage on Liberty Slash. Another route you could go is to use a recent Wyrmprint, the Warrior Maiden. So the Warrior Maiden would give Odetta some Slayer's Strength, meaning for every certain amount of foes defeated per quest, she could gain some strength, and it would also give her Recovery Potency. So Recovery Potency would be nice for her Freedom Ring skill, and with a certain 4-star sword, she could also heal through that. If you have a certain dragon equipped to her, namely Cupid, it could also boost the Recovery Potency of Cupid. So I do like those as Wyrmprints. And speaking of dragons, Cupid I think is one of the strongest options for Odetta. Besides that, I also think you could look at the new dragon Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh having that extra resistance to Shadow could keep Odetta above 70% HP a little bit more easily. So if that's something you're interested in, I think that either of these dragons would be amazing options. It just depends on who you have. If you only have Lindworm, that is another option as well. For teammates for Odetta, I definitely think it pays off to try to keep her HP high, and she is pretty good at keeping the HP of her teammates high. So Annalise stands out as one of the strongest teammates. She also has Poison Res. She can energize Odetta, meaning that you can get either a bigger heal using her second skill, or a bigger attack using her first skill. And Annalise also wants to stay above 70% HP so she gets more skill damage, and Odetta can help heal and make that possible. From there, I'd pick a more unconventional choice as the second teammate. I would say Halloween Althemia could also be quite interesting. Halloween Althemia wants to be at full HP to get an extra strength boost, at least if you've promoted her, and Odetta can help keep her at that full HP, as well as giving her a strength buff that can compensate for her somewhat lower DPS. In turn, Halloween Althemia has a heal that will be able to keep Odetta topped off and above 70% HP, so she can keep her strength up as well. Finally, for weapons for Odetta, Odetta doesn't really cause stun, so I don't think the new Stun Punisher sword is particularly relevant for her. That is now craftable through Void Battles, but instead I like the 4-star Light Elemental sword we had before. This sword, Astral Edge, allows Odetta to heal herself and apply a regen effect. And if she is a 5-star, that regen effect will also get that buff time bonus. So that is a pretty nice complement to her already pretty potent second skill that heals your team. This one will just heal herself, but once again, keeping her above that HP cutoff to make sure her strength is as strong as possible. Besides that, the 5-star Light Sword, if you're willing to commit the resources to it, Zex's End, it just gives Odetta another attacking skill, and that is also always welcome on a powerful sword attacker. And speaking of powerful sword attackers, it's time that we finally get to the end of the showcase with Albert. So just like Odetta, Albert is a light element sword attack type, but this time around he is a natural 5-star. And Albert definitely has the stats to back up his status as a natural 5-star. He has a whopping 502 strength at his maximum, which is among the highest strengths in the game. It's not quite at the pinnacle, but it is really solid, and as a light sword unit, he is pretty much unmatched in terms of his raw power. His first skill, Lightning Burst, deals light damage to the target and nearby enemies, but if his second skill, Thunderous Impulse, is active, that Lightning Burst is going to be upgraded. It's going to deal even more damage in the first hit and deal some extra hits to that target and anyone nearby. So you're probably wondering what Thunderous Impulse does, and it is a unique type of skill. It actually fills up passively over time, and abilities that increase the skill gauge fill rate won't affect that. So Thunderous Impulse will electrify Albert for 20 seconds, and while electrified, his 4 strikes will deal extra damage and can inflict paralysis. That's on top of boosting the effect of Lightning Burst that I already mentioned before. And in addition to that, Albert also has Electrically Charged as his third ability. So anytime he's electrified for those 20 seconds, he is going to get a 25% raw boost to his strength, which is a huge amount of extra strength to have for 20 seconds. His first ability is Force Strike damage of 50%. That is also a whopping extra 50% damage to Force Strikes, which are already the forte and the expertise of sword units. And then finally, of course, just like Odetta, he has Poison Rest that goes up to 100%. His Dragon Haste co-ability is also going to be higher than hers because he is a natural 5-star and she is a natural 4-star. So as far as attackers go, everything considered, looking at Albert's kit, I have to say he is probably one of the strongest attackers in the game. Sword units already want to be using Force Strikes. It is what makes them so effective, and one of the reasons they're brought along to quests is because they can break bosses extremely quickly with their Force Strikes. Thunderous Impulse just tops that off and makes it even more potent. An extra 50% Force Strike damage adds to that even further, and Electrically Charged is an amazing personal ability. So I think that Albert is a great attacker, excellent pickup, but just like with the other 5 stars, I just want to point out you may or may not be able to get him. He will be added to the normal summoning pool later, and he'll possibly be added to 5-star tickets once they expand the roster of who's on those, if they do, as there is a precedent to do so. So if you're not able to pick up Albert now, although this is probably your best chance to get him, there will be a chance potentially in the future to get him off focus. As far as builds for Albert go, though, I definitely think playing up his skill damage and just strength is the way to go. So just like with Odetta, and perhaps even more so, the Shining Overlord is a great option for Albert. If you don't want to use that and want to use something more general for him, I do think that Resounding Rendition is the de facto strongest attack Wyrmprint in the game right now, so that would be my other recommendation if you have it. Besides that, for dragons, Gilgamesh and Cupid are the 2 strongest attacking dragons for light, with Lindworm being your budget option if you don't have access to either of those. As far as teammates for Albert, I do like Halloween Elisan and I like Lucretia quite a lot. Even though both of these adventurers have Curse Res and Albert has Poison Res, I think the appeal of these is for Halloween Elisan, her Gauge Accelerator combined with Albert's Force Strikes are just going to annihilate the enemy in their overdrive state. And from there, Lucretia with her Broken Punisher should be able to deal some massive damage. So other than that, I also like that Halloween Elisan will further increase the damage that Albert is dealing through her first skill, and Lucretia will be able to energize the team so long as everyone avoids afflictions and is pretty careful about that. Finally, for weapons for Albert, I think that the original 5-star light sword, Zex's End, is good. I don't like the 4-star light sword as much on him, since I think the heal is less relevant on him as it is on Odetta. So you could consider using the new Void sword. That would give him 50% skill prep, which is nothing to sneeze at, but it is something you'd want to use with stun-inducing teammates to actually take advantage of the stun Punisher, and the stats are going to be a bit weaker on those Void weapons as well. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot to say about Albert that hasn't already been said. This is a very powerful character, and being the light element, he's going to be effective on pretty much any content in the game. So I do think Albert is one of the strongest adventurers we've gotten in a while, and if you're lucky enough to summon him, I think that you should be pretty happy with the results. But with all of the adventures out of the way, let's talk about the showcase as a whole. I think that where the showcase falters a bit is when it comes to the Wyrmprints. While both 5-star Wyrmprints are pretty strong in certain contexts, it's a little bit hard to see just how useful they'll be under the current system where we can only equip one Wyrmprint at a time. That is especially true of a solitary light, but the Shining Overlord is also fairly specific in its applications, for instance, not being as good on a map where dragon delay is an issue. So I think that the Wyrmprints as a whole, the Shining Overlord is probably the best one. The 4 stars, the other 5-star, and the 3-star, I am not a big fan of. Gilgamesh and Lindworm are both solid. Gilgamesh may ultimately end up being a little bit weaker than Cupid, but he opens some new opportunities potentially. We just don't know enough to make that decision or not yet, but certainly as a 5-star dragon, he is still a powerful dragon. As far as adventurers go, I do think Jakob is pretty weak this time around. It's unfortunate, he does have a cool kit and a cool design, but he's just outclassed by other water lancers. Odetta and Albert, though, with the only other light sword wielder being Raymond, are pretty strong. So all in all, if I had to rate this showcase, I would actually give it a pretty low 5 out of 10. With Albert, Odetta, the 2 dragons, and the Shining Overlord carrying the points on the showcase, and everything else not really contributing. If you are brand new to the game, if you're not able to clear the content on the current raid, then maybe you want to consider summoning, or if you just love Albert as a character and are perhaps re-rolling your account, this is the time to summon. This is the most likely chance that you'll have to be able to actually get Albert and target him, or even to target Odetta. But if you're a newer player who is looking to the longevity of your account and wants to pick up a wider selection of 5 stars without necessarily sniping, then I think it's probably best to wait toward the end of the showcase and get a peek at what's coming, because I do think the Dragalia showcase will come back after this, where we have a heightened rate of getting any 5 stars, any and all 5 stars, but it's harder to snipe specific units. So for me, this will probably be a skip. Odetta is the one adventure that is really tempting me, but I'm definitely going to wait till the last day of this showcase to make that decision, so I have the preview of the next showcase in hand and am able to make a better judgment on that. If you are brand new though, don't be afraid to spend some summons and just test it out. I know that can be one of the most fun things for gacha games for people. And as a light showcase, if you weren't here for any of the 4 light showcases we've had in the past, one thing to note is these adventures don't have any inherent weaknesses, and that is a little bit of an advantage that you'll have pulling on this showcase versus others. But for me, the Wyrmprints really hold it down. Jakob is a little bit weaker, even though I like him as a character, and characters are always good to collect more of. But let me know what you think of this showcase in the comments below. Are you summoning? Have you summoned? Who did you get? I'd love to hear what you have to say. Remember, the Gleam link is in the description. That's going to do it for this video, everyone. Thank you once again for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.